In a forgotten corner of Boulder, Colorado, Louie, a once proud German shepherd, lay abandoned in a rusted cage, his body weak and his spirit barely hanging on. His once bright amber eyes now flickered with a last faint hope, as if waiting for someone to hear his silent cries. Alone in the harshest of conditions, Louie's suffering was unimaginable, but he held on, praying for a rescue. Then one fateful afternoon, a sound broke the silence, a faint cry that could change everything. Who will answer Louie's desperate plea, watch his story unfold, and witness the power of love and hope in the most unexpected places? In a desolate corner of Boulder, Colorado, there lay an abandoned garbage dump that no one seemed to care about anymore. Among the twisted metal and piles of refuse was a rusting cage, small and suffocating, housing a once proud German shepherd. His name was Louie. His amber eyes, which had once gleamed with intelligence and pride, now held only a flicker of hope barely visible through the veil of exhaustion and despair. Louie had been abandoned here, forgotten by the world. He had once been a powerful dog full of energy and purpose, but now his body was thin, his ribs visible beneath his matted fur, which had long lost its shine. The cage he was trapped in was barely big enough for his wasted form, let alone allowing him to stretch or stand. Each day he could only lie in place, barely able to lift his head, let alone escape. Despite the harsh conditions, Louie's eyes still held a glimmer of hope. Each time he heard the faintest sound, his ears perked up and his head strained toward the narrow gap between the rusted bars. "Please, someone see me." His silent plea echoed through the air. His once strong bark was now barely a whisper, each cry for help weaker than the last. Yet he continued to cry out, hoping for someone to hear, someone to rescue him from the agonizing solitude he had endured for what seemed like forever. The heat of the summer sun beat down mercilessly during the day, intensifying the already unbearable conditions. Louie's throat was parched, and the air was thick with the stench of garbage and decay. When night fell, the temperature plummeted and the cold winds of Boulder cut through the trash-strewn landscape. Louie shivered, his body too weak to keep warm. His cage offered no comfort, no protection from the elements. This pitiful existence continued day after day. Louie was alone, a forgotten soul, with no one to hear his cries. In a place where people passed by without a second glance, he was nothing more than a nameless creature, stranded and fading away. Yet despite the cruel neglect, there was something in Louie that refused to give up. His body may have been failing, but his spirit lingered, even if just a little. There was a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would find him. Someone who would hear his call. And as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains one sweltering August afternoon, the faintest sound of an engine broke the silence. In the quiet town of Boulder, Colorado, lived Harmony, a 65-year-old woman who had long grown accustomed to solitude. Her small, modest home sat at the edge of the town, surrounded by overgrown weeds and the hum of passing cars, but inside it was a different world, a world of memories and quiet moments. Harmony had once been vibrant, full of energy, but now life had worn her down. Her body ached with the years, and her heart struggled with the burden of age. She had lived through the loss of a beloved husband, the departure of her children who had their own lives to live, and now the only company she had was the ticking of the clock and the rustling of the wind outside. Harmony's health had slowly deteriorated over the past few years. Heart disease had taken a toll on her body, and with each passing day the fatigue grew heavier. Simple tasks like getting up from her favorite rocking chair or walking to the kitchen became harder and harder. Her breath often came in shallow gasps, and there were days when the pain in her chest would take her breath away. She had diabetes, and the medications were expensive. Every month she was left with a limited budget, carefully counting each penny, deciding whether to buy the medicine she needed or get a few extra groceries. With the small Social Security check she received, there was little room for anything beyond the essentials. Despite her health challenges and financial strain, Harmony had never lost her resilience. Life had taught her to make do with what she had. She didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. In her younger days, she had worked as a nurse, caring for others, helping people in their times of need. Now the roles had reversed. It was she who needed help, but pride and stubbornness kept her from reaching out. Sitting in her small kitchen, looking out of the window at the dusty road, she often thought about the decisions she had made. There were regrets, of course, about the years that had slipped away and the dreams she had let go of. She thought about her children now grown and living their own lives, and the emptiness she sometimes felt in her heart. She missed her husband Bill more than she could express. It was in these moments of quiet reflection that Harmony would remind herself of the strength she had inherited from all the trials she had faced. Age was not an excuse, she thought. She might be getting older, but she could still stand strong. She would make it through. After all, she had already survived so much. The loneliness, the financial difficulties, the pain. It had all been a part of her journey. But there was one thing she had learned for sure: life doesn't stop no matter how hard it gets. And as long as she could, she would keep moving forward. Yet there were days when the silence became too much, when the days stretched on endlessly and she wondered how much longer she could keep this up. But then, just as the darkness of her thoughts began to consume her, there would be a small spark, a flicker of something better on the horizon. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the quiet streets of Boulder. Harmony had spent most of the day resting, her body aching from the relentless pull of age. It was the kind of afternoon that invited reflection, and perfect for sitting at the kitchen table, looking out the window at the dusty road and contemplating the life she had built. Yet today there was a task to attend to. Her diabetes medication was running low, and she had made an appointment with the free clinic for a refill. The trip, though a simple one, was always a challenge for her now. But she could not let herself falter. The bills were already tight, and she had little room to miss a visit, especially with her health deteriorating. With a sigh, she grabbed her worn purse and slid into the driver's seat of her old Ford pickup. The air was thick with heat as she started the engine, and the rumbling of the truck was the only sound breaking the stillness. She took the usual route, passing familiar landmarks, small houses, quiet corners, and finally the outskirts of town. As she neared Blake's salvage yard, the old metal gates creaked in the wind, and the sight of the junkyard loomed ahead. It was a shortcut she had taken countless times before, a simple detour that would save her a few minutes and a couple of dollars in gas. But today something was different. As she drove along the edge of the scrapyard, a faint sound reached her ears, a sound that made her heart stop. It wasn't the sound of the usual noises she passed by each day, no barking dogs or clanging metal. This was something softer, more desperate. A faint cry barely audible over the hum of her engine, yet unmistakable. It was a sound that tugged at her chest, a plea for help, faint yet filled with hopelessness. Harmony's foot hovered over the gas pedal. She had heard it. She was sure of it. But what if it was nothing? What if it was just the wind or a stray animal? She couldn't afford to get involved. She didn't have the strength, the resources, or the time. Yet there it was again. Another pitiful whimper, this time louder, more distinct. The cry of an animal in pain. She slowed the truck to a stop, her hands tightening around the steering wheel. For a moment, she sat frozen in place, weighing the consequences. Could she afford to help? Was it wise to get involved? At her age, with her failing health and the little money she had left, was it really her responsibility to intervene? But then, as she sat there in the stillness, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a flicker of empathy, a longing to make a difference, however small, however brief. She could turn away, keep driving and leave it to someone else, or she could follow that voice, that deep inner feeling, and at least see if there was something she could do. With a deep breath, Harmony opened the door and stepped out of the truck. Her knees protested the movement, but she ignored the pain. Slowly, she made her way toward the source of the sound, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was not just a random decision. She was about to face something that would change her life forever. As she approached the back corner of the junkyard, hidden behind piles of twisted metal and discarded junk, she saw him. Louie, the German Shepherd. Harmony's breath caught in her throat as she made her way through the junkyard, each step heavy with uncertainty. The scent of metal decay and rot filled the air, mixing with the sharpness of the dust swirling around her. The heat was oppressive, but her mind was focused solely on the sound that had drawn her here, the desperate cry of a creature in pain. As she rounded a pile of rusted scrap metal, the sight that greeted her was enough to make her stomach churn. Louie lay in a small rusted cage that barely contained his emaciated body. His once glorious German Shepherd frame was now skeletal, his ribs visible beneath the skin. His fur, once thick and strong, had fallen out in patches, leaving behind raw, infected skin that was crawling with flies. A few sores dotted his body, some open and weeping, others crusted over with dried blood. His condition was far worse than anything Harmony had imagined. The dog's eyes, though dull with pain, held a flicker of something more, a sliver of hope. His amber gaze met hers, and in that brief moment, she felt the weight of his suffering. Harmony's heart tightened. How could anyone let a living being fall so low, so forgotten? Louie's body was a stark contrast to the vibrant, powerful creature she had once imagined. His frame was weak, and every breath seemed to cause him pain. The stench of his filth was overwhelming, a mix of urine, feces, and decay, but it didn't matter to Harmony. In that moment, all she could focus on was the desperation in Louie's eyes. He wasn't just an abandoned animal. He was a soul pleading for help, for salvation from a life of torment. She stood frozen for a moment, staring into his eyes. The connection between them was instant, undeniable. There was no sound except for the faint rustling of the wind, the quiet clink of metal in the distance, and the soft panting of Louie as he strained against the cage. His body trembled not from aggression, but from the toll that months, no 7 months, of abandonment and neglect had taken on him. But still there was a glimmer of something in those eyes, a flicker of hope that had not yet been extinguished. He whimpered softly, a quiet plea that echoed in Harmony's chest, filling her with an ache that went beyond just sympathy. It was a cry for help, pure, raw, and so filled with trust, as if Louie, despite everything, still believed that someone could come to his aid. Harmony crouched down in front of the cage, her knees protesting, but she didn't care. Her trembling hands reached out, and she allowed her fingers to hover just above the bars, unsure if she should touch him, if he would recoil, or worse, lash out at the touch of another human. But Louie did not flinch. Instead, he stretched his neck forward slowly, painfully, until his nose brushed against her fingertips. It was the smallest of gestures, so fragile, so tentative. But in that moment, it was everything. A silent understanding passed between them. Louie had made the choice to trust her, just as she had made the choice to stop to listen to his cries. Harmony's heart swelled with emotion as a tear slipped down her cheek. This was more than just a rescue. This was a promise that Louie was no longer alone. But even with the connection that had formed between them, the reality of the situation hit her like a wave. Harmony didn't know how she could help him. She didn't know what the next steps would be. She could see how badly Louie was suffering, but was she strong enough to carry the weight of his rescue? Could she take on the responsibility of helping a creature in such a broken state when her own life was so fragile? Harmony took a deep breath, steadying herself. The weight of the decision ahead of her pressed down hard on her chest, but she couldn't turn away now. She had made a promise with that gentle touch. A promise to Louie that she would not leave him in that cage, abandoned and forgotten. The flicker of trust in his eyes was all she needed to push forward. She slowly pulled open the rusted cage door, the metal creaking and protesting as if it too was reluctant to release the creature within. Louie, weak as he was, remained still, watching her with those amber eyes that seemed to be pleading, waiting for the next step. He didn't struggle, didn't try to escape. Instead, he seemed to wait for her to make the first move. It was as though they both knew that this moment was more than just a simple rescue. It was a new beginning for both of them. But with each inch she moved the door, the reality of what she was doing hit her harder. She had no idea what was next. What would she do with Louie once he was free? She lived in a small home with little space and fewer resources. She didn't even have enough for herself, let alone another life to care for. And yet, as her hand lingered over the door, she realized something important. If she didn't act now, Louie might never have another chance. With a soft click, the cage door swung open completely. Louie took a tentative step forward, his body trembling from weakness and fear. Harmony reached out again, her hand hovering just above his, unsure of how he would respond. He didn't recoil. Instead, Louie leaned into her touch, his head pressing gently against her palm as though he knew that this small act of kindness was the lifeline he had been waiting for. Tears blurred Harmony's vision as she crouched down to gently coax him out. The dog's once magnificent coat was thin and patchy, his bones nearly poking through the frail skin. But still his eyes, the eyes that had once held the pride of a warrior, spoke of a quiet strength, a spirit that had not yet been broken. Together they made their way toward the truck, Harmony's hands shaking with the effort, her heart racing with every step. But as they neared the truck, a voice called out from behind her. "You can't take that dog," said the man. Jack, the owner of the junkyard, stood just a few feet away, his arms crossed and his expression hard as stone. "That animal's trouble. He's dangerous. I've got him locked up for a reason." Harmony stopped in her tracks. Jack's tone was cold, and his eyes carried a sharp, judgmental edge. His body language was aggressive, as if daring her to challenge him. He had no intention of letting her take Louie. Harmony could feel her resolve waver. She knew he had power here, and any attempt to defy him could lead to serious consequences. What if he tried to call the police on her? But there was something else, something stronger urging her forward. She couldn't leave Louie to the fate Jack had planned for him. He had already suffered enough. "Please," Harmony said, her voice steadier than she felt. "This dog is sick. He needs help. You've kept him locked up for months. This isn't right." Jack took a step forward, his face hardening. "It's not your problem. You don't know what you're talking about. That dog tried to attack one of my workers. He's dangerous. I'm doing what's best for the community. But he's starving." Harmony countered the words, coming out in a rush. "He's dying and you're keeping him in this cage. That's not helping anyone." Jack's expression darkened. He wasn't interested in reason, and his patience was running thin. "This is private property, lady. Get out of here or I'll call the cops. I'm not going to let you take him." The threat hung in the air. Harmony's heart vicious. She knew she had to make a decision now. Her instincts told her she couldn't back down, not when Louie's life was on the line. Harmony reached for her phone. "I'm calling the police." Jack's face twisted in anger. He glared at her for a moment, then muttered something under his breath before walking off toward his truck, his workers trailing behind him. Harmony stood there, hands trembling as she looked down at Louie. He was watching her as if waiting for the next step. She had won this round, but she knew it wasn't over. Jack would not give up easily. The tension in the air felt like a thick, suffocating fog. Harmony stood her ground, her eyes fixed on Jack as he turned away, muttering under his breath. But even as his footsteps faded into the distance, she knew this was far from over. Jack had made it clear. He was going to fight her every step of the way, and she wasn't sure how far he would go to keep Louie trapped in that hellish cage. Harmony's heart pounded in her chest as she stared down at Louie. He was still weak, but the bond they had formed in that fleeting moment of connection had only grown stronger. She couldn't leave him here, not with this man. She wouldn't let him go back to that cage, not again. Taking a deep breath, Harmony pulled out her phone and dialed the number she knew she had to call. The police. She wasn't sure what would happen next, how long it would take for the authorities to arrive, what Jack might do in the meantime. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders, but she couldn't back down now. Not when Louie had already endured so much. She couldn't let him suffer any longer. As she waited for the phone to ring, the silence around her seemed deafening. The only sound was the wind brushing against the rusted metal and the distant hum of traffic. Then Jack's voice broke the stillness once again. "You'd better think about what you're doing." Lady Jack's voice echoed from behind. He was back, standing at a distance with his arms crossed, his face set in a scowl. He had clearly been waiting, watching her every move. "This dog's dangerous. He tried to attack one of my workers. He's a liability. I've got every right to keep him contained." Harmony didn't flinch. Her voice was calm but resolute as she spoke into the phone. "I'm not leaving without him. This isn't right. He's suffering, and I'm not going to stand by and let that happen." "You don't know what you're talking about," Jack snapped, stepping closer, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You have no idea what this dog's capable of. He's been a threat ever since he got here. I'm just doing what's best for everyone around here. You've got no business sticking your nose into this." Harmony's grip on the phone tightened. She knew this wasn't just about Louie anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, even if it meant going against someone who had more power and influence in this town than she did. "I know enough to see that this dog doesn't deserve this. He's not a danger. He's a victim of your neglect." Harmony shot back her words sharp and firm, "And I'm not leaving without him." Jack's face twisted with anger. He took another step forward, his fists clenching at his sides. "You don't get it, do you? He's dangerous. And if you take him, you'll be in trouble. I'm not letting you ruin my business over some stray dog." But Harmony didn't waver. She stood tall, her back straight as she locked eyes with him. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her, not when Louie's life was on the line. She wouldn't let her fear stop her from doing what was right. "I'm calling the police," she said again, her voice steady. "And I'm not leaving until they get here." Jack sneered, but Harmony could see the frustration building in his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged. He had control here in his junkyard, and Harmony's defiance was something he clearly didn't know how to handle. "Fine," he spat, "but don't expect me to just stand by while you take him. I'll do whatever it takes to stop you." With that, he turned sharply, walking back toward his truck, his workers following closely behind. Harmony felt a wave of relief, but it was quickly replaced by the knot of anxiety in her stomach. The police were on their way, but the situation wasn't over yet. Jack wasn't going to let this go easily. She could feel it. This was just the beginning of a much bigger fight. She glanced at Louie, still standing weakly by her side, his amber eyes watching her with an almost trusting gaze. Despite everything he had been through, he had stayed by her side, and now it was her turn to stay by his. The minutes felt like hours as Harmony stood in the oppressive heat, clutching her phone tightly in her hands. Jack's threat still lingered in the air, but she refused to let it intimidate her. She had done what she needed to do, called the police, and now she had to trust they would do their part. The weight of the situation, the uncertainty of what would happen next, made her stomach churn. Would they come in time? As if on cue, the sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. Harmony's pulse quickened. The police were here. She watched as a patrol car pulled up, the officer behind the wheel stepping out with a sense of authority. His uniform was neatly pressed, but his expression was one of concern as he scanned the junkyard. The officer was young, with short brown hair and a focused demeanor. He didn't waste time looking around, his eyes locked onto Harmony, and in that moment she felt a wave of relief wash over her. "You called about an animal in distress?" the officer asked, his voice calm but firm. "Yes," Harmony replied quickly, pointing toward Louie's cage. "That dog, Louie, he's been kept in a cage for months. He's malnourished, sick, and—" Her voice wavered with emotion. "He needs help. I couldn't just leave him there." The officer nodded and followed her gaze. His expression hardened as he saw Louie still standing weakly, his fur matted and body frail, barely able to stand on his own. The officer was already assessing the situation, his mind ticking through the steps of what needed to be done. Without saying a word, he walked toward Louie's cage, his steps measured but purposeful. "Sir," Harmony called after him. "That man, he's the one who's kept him there. His name is Jack. He won't let me take the dog." The officer glanced over his shoulder at Jack, who was standing by his truck, arms crossed clearly, watching the scene unfold. Jack's anger was evident, but the officer's expression remained unshaken. "I'll handle this," the officer said, his voice reassuring. Harmony watched as the officer approached Jack. Jack's face twisted with frustration, his earlier bravado faltering in the face of law enforcement. He tried to argue, his words sharp and defensive, but the officer calmly raised his hand to stop him. "Sir, we have a situation here. I'm taking this dog with me." "What?" Jack barked in disbelief. "This is my property. That dog is dangerous, and I'm the one who decides what happens here." "You can't just—" "I can," the officer interrupted, his tone firm, "and I will. This animal has been neglected and mistreated. Under the law, I'm removing him for his safety. He looked back at Harmony, nodding. I'll make sure he's safe. We'll take care of it from here. Jack's face flushed with anger, but the officer's words held weight, and he knew it. He clenched his fists, but there was nothing he could do. The law was on Harmony's side, and there was no way to get around it. I'll have this sorted out, but you're not taking that dog. Jack spat, his voice laced with bitterness. The officer's eyes narrowed, but he didn't engage with Jack further. Instead, he turned to the workers standing around, who were now visibly uncomfortable with the tension. This is a matter for animal control. I'm not asking for permission. I'm taking this dog. Jack muttered something under his breath, but as the officer moved toward the cage, he knew his hands were tied. There was nothing more he could do. With a heavy sigh, he walked away, shaking his head in defeat. The officer approached the cage and unlocked the door. Louie hesitated for a moment before stepping out, his movements slow and uncertain. But with each careful step, it was clear that he was free. Free from the cage, from the neglect, from the pain. Harmony let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was happening. Louie was going to be okay. The officer led Louie gently toward his squad car. He turned to Harmony and said, "We'll get him checked out at the clinic. We'll make sure he gets the care he needs. You've done the right thing." Harmony nodded, tears of relief welling up in her eyes. Louie was safe, and now he had a chance to heal. Harmony sat in the sterile waiting room of the animal rescue clinic, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her sleeve. The heavy silence of the room was broken only by the occasional shuffle of footsteps or the soft murmur of the receptionist. Harmony's mind raced with worries. How bad was Louie's condition? Was he going to make it? She had seen the extent of his suffering, his frail body, the sores on his skin, the exhaustion in his eyes, but she had no medical expertise. She only knew one thing for certain: Louie deserved a chance. The vet came out after what felt like hours. Dr. Simmons, a kind-looking man in his early 40s, greeted her with a reassuring smile, though his eyes carried a depth of concern. "Mrs. Sullivan, we've started treating him," he said, "but Louie is in critical condition." Harmony's heart sank. She had hoped for good news, but the doctor's words made it clear that Louie's recovery wouldn't be an easy one. Dr. Simmons continued, "He's severely malnourished. His body weight is half what it should be. He has multiple infections, some of which are still untreated. The sores on his skin need immediate care, and there's a risk of organ damage from the long-term neglect." Harmony fought to hold back tears. She hadn't imagined it would be this bad, but even in the darkest of times, she couldn't lose hope. "He'll need around-the-clock care," Dr. Simmons added. "It will be a slow process, and we'll need to monitor him closely, but we're starting treatment right away. We'll give him fluids, antibiotics, and start him on a special diet to help him gain strength." After hearing the plan, Harmony knew the road ahead would be long. She had already committed to helping Louie, but this felt like a weight she wasn't sure she could carry alone. She was elderly with her own health struggles and limited resources, but she had already come so far, and there was no way she could walk away now. "Thank you," Dr. Harmony said, her voice shaking with gratitude. "I'll do whatever it takes to help him." Dr. Simmons nodded. "He's lucky to have you. It's going to take patience, on both your part and his, but he's a fighter. I can see that." Harmony smiled weakly, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and fear. Louie wasn't alone anymore. He had a chance now, a chance to heal, and she was determined to see him through it. As she sat next to Louie's cage, watching him breathe heavily, Harmony whispered softly, "We're in this together now, Louie. I won't leave you." She knew it wouldn't be easy. It might take months, maybe longer, but she wasn't going anywhere. Her heart ached for him, but she would be there every step of the way, helping him trust again, helping him find his strength. And just as Louie had looked to her for help, now she was going to be there for him just as she had promised. No one would abandon him again. The days blended together as Louie's recovery began slowly but steadily. Harmony visited him at the clinic every day, never missing a single moment. She watched with quiet determination, keeping a close eye on his progress. Louie was weak, too fragile to do much more than lie on his blanket, but there were signs, small signs, that he was improving. His ribs were still visible, but the gaunt outline of his body was no longer as extreme. His fur, though patchy, started to regain some softness. and his breathing became less labored. Each meal was met with a little more enthusiasm, and he started gaining back the weight he had lost during his months of neglect. But the physical healing was just one part of the battle. Louie's mind. His spirit was another matter entirely. Despite the care he was receiving, there was still a deep wound within him that no amount of food or medicine could fix. The once vibrant dog who had been proud and strong was now hesitant and fearful. The abuse he had endured left invisible scars deeper than any wound on his body. Whenever someone walked into his room, Louie's eyes would dart nervously, his body tensing as if bracing for more pain. He was still learning to trust again, and while Harmony's heart ached for him, she knew this wasn't something that could be rushed. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly, one careful step at a time. Harmony would sit beside him, her hand resting gently on the cage, speaking softly to him. "It's okay, Louie. You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." At first, Louie would flinch at the sound of her voice, but as the days passed, he started to react differently. His tail would twitch just a little, and sometimes he would even inch closer to the bars as if wanting to be near her. Harmony was patient. She never pushed him. She simply sat by his side, offering him comfort and calm day after day. Her love for him grew stronger with every passing moment. The bond between them wasn't just about saving his life, it was about healing together, learning to trust each other again. Harmony's presence became a source of stability for Louie, just as his quiet resilience began to heal something in her as well. The staff at the clinic noticed the change in Louie too. Dr. Simmons was impressed with how far he had come, but he reminded Harmony, his recovery isn't just about his body. The real work is in his heart. It's going to take time and it's going to be slow. But you're doing the right thing by sticking with him. And so Harmony did. She kept coming morning after morning, and with each visit, Louie's progress was more noticeable. The light in his eyes began to return, though it was still dim, not quite the bright spark he once had. But it was there. That flicker of hope that he was healing, that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for him to find joy again. Harmony began to speak to him even more, sharing stories of her life, talking about Bill, and how she had never expected her life to change so much. She spoke about her children, her loneliness, and the little things that made her smile each day. Sometimes Louie would listen intently, his head tilted slightly, as if he were trying to understand her words. Sometimes he would rest his head on the edge of his cage, letting her voice wash over him like a warm, comforting blanket. Slowly, the bond between them deepened. It wasn't just about rescuing Louie anymore. It was about creating a life together, one where they both felt safe, where they could heal side by side. The early morning light streamed through the small window of Harmony's trailer, casting a soft glow on the room. She sat in her usual spot by Louie's cage, quietly watching him as he rested. The gentle rhythm of his breathing had become a comforting sound, one that had replaced the emptiness that once filled her home. Each visit, each moment with Louie made her feel a little more whole, a little less lonely. As Harmony brushed Louie's fur, she felt a sudden vibration in her pocket. It was her phone, a device she rarely used except for the occasional call from her daughter. She hesitated, wondering if it might be more of the same, calls that always seemed to come when she least expected, always with something pressing, always with more bad news. But when she saw the name on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. Daniel. Her son. Daniel, the one she hadn't heard from in over 2 decades. Her hand trembled slightly as she answered, unsure what to expect. "Hello," she said softly, her voice catching in her throat. "Mom." The voice on the other end was familiar yet unfamiliar. It was deeper, stronger than the young man she remembered, but still it had the same warmth, the same edge of emotion that had always been there. "Harmony, it's Daniel. I've been meaning to call you for a long time, but I didn't know how to start. I've been following the story about Louie, about the dog. I wanted to check in on you." Harmony's breath caught, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Daniel had been gone for so long. His absence had left a hole in her heart that she had never known how to fill. And now here he was, calling her out of the blue, concerned not just about her, but about Louie. I can't believe it's you," she finally managed, her voice shaking with emotion. Daniel hadn't contacted her in years, and yet here he was reaching out. "How did you find out about Louie? I saw the article in the paper," Daniel replied, his tone hesitant, like he wasn't quite sure how to navigate this conversation. "I've been following it. I read about everything you've been doing for that dog, and I couldn't just sit back and not do anything. I want to help you, Mom. I know things have been difficult for you, and I'm here now." For a long moment, Harmony just sat there letting his words sink in. Her son was offering to help her, to be there for her after so many years of silence. It was overwhelming, almost too much to comprehend. The walls that had once separated them seemed to crumble in an instant, and for the first time in years she felt the warmth of connection, the glimmer of hope for the future. "I didn't expect this," Harmony whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. She hadn't expected Daniel to reach out. After all these years, the pain of his absence had faded into resignation, but now his voice, his concern for her, was like a lifeline. "I know," Daniel said, his voice softening. "I've been a mess, Mom. After everything, I thought it would be easier to just disappear. I didn't know how to face you after everything that happened, but I've changed. I'm not that person anymore." Harmony felt her heart twist in her chest. She had waited for this moment for so long. The reunion she had never dared to hope for was finally happening, and it was as if time had rewound, offering a chance at something she thought was lost forever. "Daniel, you don't have to explain," she said, wiping her eyes. I don't know what to say. You've been gone so long, and now you want to help? It's all so sudden. I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I want to make things right, to be here for you for whatever you need." He paused, his voice steady but full of emotion. "And if you'll let me, I want to help with Louie too. He's part of this family now, and I want to make sure he gets everything he needs." Harmony smiled softly, her heart swelling with a mix of joy and disbelief. Her son had reached out, not just for her, but for Louie as well. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't carrying everything on her own. Harmony sat quietly in her small living room, the phone still resting in her lap after the call with Daniel. She was flooded with emotions, relief, joy, and disbelief that her son had finally reached out. The distance of years, the silence between them, seemed to vanish in the span of a few minutes. Daniel wanted to help, and the idea of them rebuilding their relationship filled her with hope. But amidst these newfound emotions, something else was pulling at her mind. As Harmony glanced across the room at the cluttered coffee table, her eyes landed on an old wooden box tucked in the corner. It had always been there, a reminder of the life she had shared with Bill, her late husband. She hadn't opened it in years. It contained his belongings, things that were once part of the life they had built together. With a sigh, she got up from her chair, her knees creaking as she moved toward the box. She hadn't looked through it since Bill passed away, too lost in her grief to want to relive the memories. But today was different. The call from Daniel had stirred something in her, a longing for answers, for understanding, for closure. She lifted the lid of the box carefully, the familiar smell of old leather and paper filling the air. Inside were photographs, Bill's military medals, a few old letters, and other keepsakes from their time together. But at the very bottom of the box, something caught her eye, a small folded piece of paper. It was an envelope sealed with care, as if it had been placed there with intention. With trembling hands, Harmony opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from Bill, written in his familiar, neat handwriting. As she read the words, her breath caught in her throat. "My dearest Harmony, if you are reading this, then I am no longer by your side. I know how much you have carried on your own, and I know how strong you are. But there will be moments when you feel alone, when you need someone to watch over you. That is why I've arranged for Louie to be with you. He is not just a dog, Harmony. He is a guardian, someone who will protect you when I can no longer do so. I bought him for you before I was too sick, knowing that you would need him more than ever. He will be your companion, your friend, and your protector. I wish I could be there for you, but know that Louie will take my place. Please love him as I have loved you. Yours forever, Bill." Harmony's hands trembled as she finished reading the letter. Her mind spun, trying to process what she had just read. Bill had known. He had known he was going to die, and he had prepared for her future in a way she had never expected. The idea that Louie had been meant for her, that he was Bill's final gift, hit her with an overwhelming wave of emotion. Bill had never mentioned it. She had no idea that he had been planning to bring a dog into their lives, especially not a dog like Louie, a German shepherd so loyal and strong. She had been too consumed by her grief to notice any of the signs that Bill had been preparing for the inevitable, but now, as she held the letter, she understood. She sat back in her chair, the letter still in her hands, feeling a mix of awe and sadness. Bill had always been thoughtful, always caring, even in the face of his illness. He had thought of her. Even after he was gone, he had made sure she wouldn't be alone. And now, with Louie by her side, she felt like she wasn't alone anymore. As the tears welled up in her eyes, Harmony whispered softly, "Thank you, Bill." It was then that she noticed something else, something that made her heart beat a little faster. There was a small piece of paper tucked under the letter, almost hidden, as if it were meant to be found later. She unfolded it carefully, revealing a microchip registration document. The date on the form read August 2018, just a few months before Bill's passing. Her heart skipped as she read the name listed on the document. Louie's name was there along with the note, "For my Harmony, protect her when I can't." Bill had chosen Louie for her. He had made arrangements, had ensured she would have someone to take care of her, someone to watch over her when he couldn't. It was all clear now. The microchip registration document had left Harmony in a state of quiet shock, the realization of Bill's plan for Louie slowly sinking in. Bill had prepared for the future, even in his final days, ensuring that she would have a companion to watch over her. But as the truth settled into her heart, there was still one question lingering in her mind. What had Louie's life been like? Before he came to her, Harmony needed answers, and she was determined to find them. She had already contacted Dr. Carpenter about Louie's condition, and today he had some of the answers she sought. When Dr. Carpenter entered the room, he was holding a folder, his expression serious but kind. He had been working with Louie closely ever since the rescue, and the progress he had made was clear, though there was still much healing to be done. "I've gathered some of Louie's records," Dr. Carpenter said, sitting down beside Harmony. "There's something you should know about his past. It's a bit of a long story, but I think it will give you a clearer picture of who Louie really is." Harmony leaned forward, eager for the information. She wanted to understand Louie's journey, wanted to know what had brought him to this point. Dr. Carpenter opened the folder and began to speak. Louie was purchased by Bill in July 2018, just a few months before his death. Bill had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and knew his time was running out. He spent those last months not only fighting the disease, but also making sure that you wouldn't be alone. Harmony's chest tightened as she listened. Bill had known his time was short, but he had put so much thought into making sure she would be cared for even after he was gone. Dr. Carpenter continued, Bill had a specific plan for Louie. He didn't want just any dog. He wanted a guard dog, someone who would protect you, someone who could look after you when he could no longer do so himself. Harmony's heart swelled with gratitude, but the next part of the story made her feel a wave of sorrow for Louie. Dr. Carpenter looked down at his notes before continuing. Bill began training Louie right away. Even while he was sick, he made sure that Louie received the best training. He enrolled him in an obedience program, took him to a local protection dog school, and spent hours each week working with him. Louie had natural instincts, and Bill knew that he would become the protector he needed. Harmony closed her eyes, imagining Bill's dedication in those final months, pushing through his pain to train Louie, knowing that he might never get to see the dog fulfill his purpose. But Dr. Carpenter's voice took on a more somber tone. Everything changed for Louie when Bill passed away in November 2018. Afterward, Louie's life took a drastic turn. He paused for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. Louie was only 7 months old when Bill died, still a pup, but he had been well trained. The problem came when Louie was sold off. We don't have all the details, but it seems that someone took him, and that's when everything went wrong. Louie was passed through a few hands unsupervised and neglected. The training Bill had worked so hard to instill was lost, as the people who owned him couldn't handle a dog like Louie, strong, protective, but still a puppy. Eventually, he was abandoned, left to fend for himself until he ended up in that junkyard. Harmony's heart ached for Louie. The love and care Bill had poured into him had been shattered by the cruelty of the world. She couldn't fathom how the dog she was now caring for had gone through such trauma after everything Bill had done to protect him. He must have been so confused, Harmony whispered, her voice breaking. Dr. Carpenter nodded gravely. Louie never had a chance to be a puppy. His early months were marked by training and discipline, but he never had a stable home. He had been broken down, and what's worse, he had been taught that humans were a source of pain, not care. That's why he's so skittish, so cautious around people. It's going to take time to rebuild his trust. Harmony closed her eyes, feeling a deep sense of empathy for Louie. He had been through so much, and he was still trying to heal, still trying to trust her. She had a lot of work ahead of her, but she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't going to let Louie face any more pain. She was going to give him the love and stability he deserved. Harmony sat in her small living room, staring at the photo of Bill that still hung above the couch. The last few weeks had brought so much change into her life, and now, with Daniel reaching out, it felt as though the past was catching up with her. As much as she wanted to believe that the years of silence could be erased, she knew that there were painful truths to confront, both for her and for Daniel. She had always hoped that one day he would return, that somehow they would rebuild what had been broken. But what had happened to him? Why had he left so suddenly all those years ago? As she sat on the couch trying to gather her thoughts, she heard the faint buzz of her phone. It was a text from Daniel. "I know we haven't talked in a long time, but I owe you an explanation. I'm sorry, Mom, but I need you to understand. I need to be honest with you." Harmony's heart beat a little faster. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew this conversation was long overdue. She wiped a tear from her cheek and replied, "I'm listening." A few minutes later, the phone rang and Daniel's voice came through the line, familiar but deeper than she remembered. He sounded hesitant at first, like he wasn't sure how to start. But then he spoke, the words tumbling out one after another. "Mom, I've been a mess. I know you probably think I just disappeared, but I couldn't handle the pain. After Dad died, I felt lost, like nothing mattered anymore. I made some bad choices, and I thought leaving would make everything easier for you. I thought it would protect you from my mistakes. But the truth is, I was just running away from everything." He paused, and Harmony could hear the heaviness in his breath. "I was angry, Mom. Angry at everything. At Dad's death, at you, at myself. I got into some bad things, and I didn't want you to see me like that. I wanted to protect you from what I had become, so I stayed away. But it wasn't right. I shouldn't have done that." His voice cracked, and Harmony's heart broke, hearing the sorrow in it. "You weren't the only one hurting, Daniel," she whispered, her voice full of quiet pain. "I didn't understand what happened to you, but I never stopped caring. I never stopped hoping you'd come back." "I know, Mom," Daniel said softly, his voice tinged with regret. "And I'm sorry. I've spent years feeling like I failed you, but I'm here now, and I want to make things right. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be the person you thought I was, the person I was supposed to be. I owe it to you." Harmony wiped away another tear, her chest heavy with emotion. She had waited for this moment, had imagined it for so many years, but the reality of it was more overwhelming than she had expected. Her son was back. And although the past couldn't be undone, she could see that he was trying to rebuild, trying to make amends. But before she could speak again, Daniel continued. "I also need to tell you something important, Mom. I've been following Louie's story. I saw the article, and I've been reading everything about him. I'm amazed by how much you've done for him, and I want to help both for you and for him." Harmony's heart skipped. Louie had become more than just a dog to her. He had become a part of her family, and hearing Daniel speak about him like that made her feel a sense of connection between them, a bridge beginning to form after all these years. "I'm coming to see you, Mom. I want to meet Louie, and I want to be there for both of you. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'm not going anywhere this time. Let me help." Harmony stood up from the couch, her hands trembling slightly. The idea of Daniel meeting Louie filled her with a sense of hope and uncertainty. She couldn't deny the feeling in her heart that maybe, just maybe, things could heal between them. Before she could say anything, the doorbell rang. Daniel's voice came through the phone once more. I'm here, Mom. I'm outside. Harmony stood frozen in the doorway, her heart racing as she looked out at the figure standing before her. Marcus Blake, the man who had locked Louie in that cage, had come to her doorstep. His presence was unsettling, and Harmony's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected to see him again after everything that had happened. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, and now, with Daniel's return and Louie's recovery, the last thing she needed was to face the man responsible for the dog's torment. Marcus stood there looking tired and weathered, his face drawn with lines of regret, but his posture was stiff, as if he still carried the weight of his past actions. His eyes, once cold and distant, now held something else. Something closer to remorse, but also fear. Fear of what she might say, fear of the truth catching up with him. I need to speak with you, Marcus said, his voice low but firm. About the dog. About Louie. Harmony's chest tightened. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of speaking, but her curiosity and her need for closure won out. She stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. Marcus hesitated for a moment before entering, his boots scuffing lightly against the floor as he followed her into the living room. Louie was lying near the window, his head lifted at the sound of the door opening, but he didn't move. He had been through so much, and the presence of Marcus seemed to make him uneasy. Harmony could see Louie's body tense, his ears slightly back, and the fur along his back bristled as if sensing something dangerous. "Louie's doing better now," Harmony said softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for Marcus to hear. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "You didn't win. He's free now." Marcus glanced at the dog, his face softening just a little. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted it to go this far," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I thought I was helping him. I thought I was doing what was best." Harmony's brow furrowed, her anger rising. "You locked him in a cage. You left him to suffer for months. How is that helping him?" Marcus flinched at her words, and for a moment he seemed almost small, like the weight of what he had done had finally caught up with him. He lowered his gaze, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't deserve it. I was angry. I was hurt. I took my pain out on him. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I've done terrible things, and I've hurt a lot of animals along the way. Louie wasn't the only one." Harmony felt a lump form in her throat, but she didn't let him see her soften. He wasn't getting away with it that easily. "And the other dogs. How many others were there?" she asked, her voice cold. Marcus hesitated before answering. Seven dogs, all big breeds, German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls. I found them on the streets, and I thought I was doing the world a favor locking them up, keeping people safe. But I was just punishing them for what had happened to me. His voice cracked, and he finally looked up at Harmony. "I didn't know how to stop. I couldn't stop. I thought I was helping, but I was hurting them more than anything." Harmony's heart ached as she listened to his words. She wanted to feel anger, but there was something in his voice, something raw, something regretful, that made her hesitate. The pain in Marcus's eyes was palpable, and for the first time she saw the depth of his torment. He wasn't the monster she had painted him to be. He was a broken man, consumed by guilt and shame. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," Marcus continued, his voice trembling. I just had to see Louie. I had to see if he survived, if he made it out alive. I've been trying to forget everything I did, but it's hard. It's harder than I thought it would be. And now that I see him, I know what I did was wrong." Harmony stood silent for a moment, staring at Marcus. She had no answers. What could she say to someone like him? What could she say to someone who had caused so much suffering to Louie and countless other animals? The weight of his confession hung in the air, and Harmony felt a strange sense of empathy. She didn't forgive him, but she understood in a way the damage that pain could do to a person. "What now?" she finally asked, her voice steady, though still carrying the undercurrent of emotion. "What happens to you now?" Marcus took a long breath, the exhaustion clear in his features. I'm going to face the consequences. I've already spoken to the authorities, I've made my confession, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm going to prison. I deserve it. But before I go, I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry, for Louie and for everything. The room was heavy with silence as Harmony stood absorbing the weight of Marcus's words. The anger she had felt earlier, the fury and disgust at what he had done to Louie seemed to dissolve under the pressure of the sincerity in his eyes. She had expected to confront a man who would fight to justify his actions, someone who would defend his cruelty, but instead, she saw something different. A broken man pleading for redemption. I know, Marcus said, his voice steady but pained. I know there's nothing I can say to make up for what I did, nothing that will make it right. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I never intended for Louie to suffer. I thought I was doing what was best. I thought I was protecting people, but all I did was hurt them. Harmony's heart twisted as she listened. The pain in his voice was raw. He wasn't trying to excuse his actions. He wasn't trying to claim that what he did was justified in any way. He was simply trying to explain, trying to make her understand that his cruelty wasn't born out of malice, but from a place of deep personal suffering. It was a revelation that left Harmony torn. She wasn't ready to forgive him, but she understood. I know what it's like to hurt, Harmony said quietly, her gaze softening as she spoke. The memory of Bill's illness, of the years of grief that had followed his death, the loneliness, the pain, it all welled up in her. Her own suffering had shaped who she was, just as Marcus's pain had led him down the path of cruelty. I understand what it feels like to carry so much pain that it blinds you. You don't see what you're doing until it's too late. Marcus's eyes filled with unshed tears. I was angry. I lost my wife. My son doesn't speak to me. I felt like the world was out to get me, and I took that anger and shoved it into those dogs. I wanted them to feel the same pain I did. But it wasn't their fault. They were just innocent creatures. Harmony stepped closer, her voice a little softer now, but still full of strength. We all carry our burdens. It's what we do with them that matters. You can't keep running from the mistakes you've made. You can't keep punishing yourself by hurting others. For a long moment, Marcus didn't speak. The weight of her words hung between them. He had been carrying a load of guilt for years, believing that his actions were somehow a reflection of his own suffering. But here in front of Harmony, he realized that the only way forward was to own up to the pain he had caused, to make amends, and to find a way to heal. I don't expect you to forgive me, Marcus said, his voice low. But I hope that in some way I can at least make up for what I've done to Louie. I'll face whatever comes, and I'll take responsibility for everything. Harmony nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of his words. It wasn't about forgetting what he had done. It wasn't about erasing the past, but it was about acknowledging the wrong and working to heal from it. Forgiveness is a long road, Marcus, she said softly. But sometimes taking the first step, being honest about the pain you've caused, is enough to begin the journey. Marcus looked at her, his face a mixture of shame and relief. I'm ready for that journey, he said quietly. I just hope it's not too late. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but full of shared understanding. They weren't friends, and perhaps they never would be, but in this moment they shared something. A recognition of the pain, the mistakes, and the possibility of redemption. Harmony sat at her small kitchen table, the papers scattered in front of her, the bills, the overdue notices, the medical expenses for Louie and Lily. Her hands trembled as she sorted through the documents, each one a reminder of how little she had left. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Every month was a struggle, and every dollar had to be accounted for. She had her Social Security check, but after paying for her medications, the rent, and keeping food on the table, there was little left for anything else. Her savings were almost gone, drained by the unexpected medical bills for Louie's care and Lily's cancer treatments. Louie needed specialized food and medication, and the cost of his long-term care was more than she could have ever anticipated. Every time she thought she might catch a break, another bill arrived, another cost she couldn't ignore. Her fingers brushed the edge of the eviction notice that lay on top of the pile. She had received it just yesterday. The landlord's words were clear. She had 30 days to come up with the rent or find somewhere else to live. The notice had been polite, almost too polite, as if he were giving her a fair chance. But Harmony knew the reality: she couldn't afford the rent. Not anymore. Not with everything else she was juggling. She stared at the paper, her eyes clouding with anxiety and despair. She had no family to turn to, no friends who could help. Her children had their own lives, and although Daniel had come back into the picture, she couldn't bring herself to ask him for help. He was just getting back on his feet, and the last thing she wanted was to burden him with her problems. Her eyes drifted over to Louie, who was lying by the door, his head resting on his paws. He had been through so much, and now he was here safe and on the road to recovery. But the financial burden of caring for him and for Lily, who was fighting her own battle with cancer, was weighing heavily on Harmony. The stress of it all had begun to take its toll. She reached for the phone and dialed the number she had been avoiding. Her daughter Jennifer was the last person she wanted to speak to, but at this point she had no choice. Lily's medical bills were growing, and there was no way Harmony could manage everything on her own anymore. "Mom," Jennifer's voice was sharp as usual, but Harmony could hear the exasperation in it. "Jennifer," Harmony said softly, I don't know what to do. The rent is overdue, and I don't know where we'll go if we can't pay it. And Louie, he needs more care. I'm doing everything I can, but it's just not enough." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Harmony held her breath, waiting for Jennifer's response. "Mom, I don't know what to say." Jennifer finally replied, her voice softer than usual. "I can't give you money, you know that, but you've got to do something. Maybe you should think about moving to a different place, somewhere cheaper. You can't keep going like this." Harmony closed her eyes, her heart sinking. Moving wasn't an option. The only place she had left was this trailer, and even it was barely affordable. "I know. I don't have many options left," she said quietly, her voice cracking slightly. Jennifer's sigh came through the phone. "Mom, you've got to get a handle on things. I don't know what you're expecting me to do." Harmony pressed her hand against her forehead. The sting of rejection hurt, but she knew that Jennifer had always been like this. She wasn't capable of helping, or maybe she just didn't want to. Either way, Harmony had to face this alone. She hung up the phone and set it down with a sense of finality. She couldn't count on anyone else. It was all up to her. The looming threat of eviction was only the beginning. There was the issue of Louie's long-term care, Lily's treatment, and the everyday expenses that seemed to multiply faster than she could keep up with. It felt impossible. Harmony's heart sank as she realized that her world was closing in on her. She had spent so many years simply surviving, never truly living, and now it felt like everything she had fought for was slipping away. But as she looked at Louie, his amber eyes looking up at her with a mixture of trust and hope, she knew she couldn't give up. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. The evening air was warm as Harmony sat in her small living room watching Louie and Lily. The two of them were growing closer every day. Louie, once so wary and fearful, now seemed to seek Lily out for comfort. He would lay beside her on the floor, his head resting gently in her lap as she softly ran her fingers through his fur. Lily, despite her own battle with illness, had become Louie's quiet healer. There was something about the bond between them that made Harmony smile even in the midst of her worries. Louie, so broken and scarred by his past, had found something he had never known before, a sense of safety and belonging. And Lily, in her innocence, had found a new sense of peace in the warmth of the dog's presence. Harmony watched as Lily whispered softly to Louie, the words barely audible. "You're my friend, Louie. You're not alone anymore. We're going to get better together." The simple kindness in Lily's voice made Harmony's heart swell. It was a reminder of the healing power of love, how it could transform the brokenness in both humans and animals alike. For the first time in a long time, Harmony allowed herself a moment of peace. Lily was no longer just a child fighting for her life, and Louie was no longer the broken dog who had been abandoned and abused. They were two souls connected by something stronger than the pain they had both endured. And yet the weight of her promises still pressed on Harmony's shoulders. She had promised to care for Louie, to make sure he never felt alone again. She had promised to protect Lily, to keep her safe from the pain of this world, but she had never expected this, to be the one who would shoulder the burden for them both. As Louie and Lily sat there wrapped in the comfort of each other's company, Harmony couldn't help but feel the sting of doubt creep in. Could she really keep her promises? Could she continue to care for Louie and Lily when her own life seemed to be unraveling? But then Louie raised his head and looked at her with those amber eyes, eyes that had once been full of fear and confusion, but now held trust and even affection. He knew that she had saved him, and he had repaid her in the only way he knew how, by allowing her to love him, to care for him, to give him a second chance. "I promise," Harmony whispered to Louie, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I will protect you. I will never let you suffer again." She looked over at Lily, who was still gently petting Louie. "And I promise you, Lily, you will never be alone. We will fight this together every step of the way." Harmony's voice wavered slightly as she looked between the two of them. She wasn't sure how she would make it through all the challenges ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: she would never give up on them. As the night stretched on, Harmony watched her daughter and the dog bond, their connection growing stronger with each passing moment. In that moment, she made a vow to herself and to them both. No matter the hardships, no matter the pain, she would always be there fighting for them, no matter what. Harmony sat in the quiet darkness of the trailer, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The weight of everything she had been carrying pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone, making it difficult to breathe. As the night wore on, her thoughts began to drift. Her life had become a constant battle, a struggle for survival, for stability, for hope. But despite everything, the quiet of the house was no longer the oppressive silence it once was. Now it was filled with the gentle sounds of Louie and Lily, a reminder of what was at stake, of the family she was trying to rebuild. But there was no escaping the reality that still loomed over her. The financial burden was growing more unbearable by the day. The eviction notice still sat on the counter, the deadline drawing closer. With the costs of Louie's care and Lily's ongoing medical treatments, Harmony didn't know how much longer she could keep up. The weight of it all felt suffocating. Every choice she made seemed to be a reminder that life wasn't easy, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't fix everything. Her health, too, was beginning to deteriorate again. The strain from the constant worry was taking its toll on her body. Her heart ached, her breath shallow, and her hands trembled as she reached for the bottle of pills on the counter. She had tried so hard to push through to make sure Louie and Lily had everything they needed, but her own body wasn't cooperating. The constant fatigue and the pressure of facing the world alone was starting to feel like too much to bear. In the quiet of her thoughts, her eyes drifted to Louie, who lay on the couch beside Lily. The two of them had fallen asleep, Louie's head resting gently in Lily's lap as she stroked his fur, the sound of her soft whispers filling the room. The sight of them together, safe and peaceful, brought a sense of calm to Harmony's heart. Louie had become more than just a dog. He had become a symbol of hope, of what they could accomplish together despite the struggles. And then there was Lily, her sweet girl, who had faced so much in her young life. Lily's illness was a constant weight on Harmony's heart, but watching her interact with Louie, watching her laugh and smile despite her pain, gave Harmony strength. It reminded her that no matter how hard things got, no matter how lost she felt, she couldn't give up now. Louie had found his place in their family, and in doing so, he had anchored them all. He had become a source of comfort and strength, and even though his past had been filled with suffering, he now helped carry them through their darkest moments. The bond between them had become unbreakable. The warmth of his presence had brought something back into Harmony's life that she hadn't known she'd lost, a sense of purpose. As the night wore on, Harmony's heart swelled with gratitude. Despite the hardship, despite the pain, she wasn't alone anymore. She had Louie, Lily, and the promise of something better, something worth fighting for. But the struggle was far from over, and as much as she wished she could shield her family from the challenges ahead, she knew she had to face them head on. There was no turning back now. It had been weeks since Daniel's return, and things were slowly starting to change. The heavy walls of silence between him and Harmony had begun to crumble, but the healing was slow, like a scab being pulled off, leaving raw skin beneath. Every day, Harmony noticed something new in her son. A quiet determination in his eyes, a strength in his words, and a willingness to make amends for the years he had been absent. Daniel wasn't the same man who had walked out all those years ago. The person standing in front of Harmony now was more humble, more aware of the mistakes he had made, and more desperate to right those wrongs. He had changed in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. "I want to help," Daniel said one evening as they sat at the kitchen table sipping on warm cups of tea. The weight of his words was undeniable. "I know I can't fix everything, but I can do more than just show up. I've wasted so much time, Mom. I know I can't get it back, but I can make sure you and Louie have what you need. I can make sure I'm here for real this time." Harmony looked at her son, her heart heavy with emotions she hadn't let herself feel in years. The betrayal of his absence still stung, but now there was a glimpse of something familiar in his eyes, something she had missed. She had spent so much time angry, hurt by his choices, that she had forgotten the boy she had raised, the young man who had once been the center of her world. "I don't know what to say, Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't expect this. I didn't expect you to come back. And I didn't expect you to want to help. You've been gone for so long." Daniel reached across the table and gently took her hand, a rare gesture of affection that spoke volumes. "I know, Mom. I don't expect you to just forgive me. I don't expect you to forget all the pain I caused. But I'm here, and I'm going to make up for the time I lost. I want to be the son you need me to be." Harmony squeezed his hand, a small spark of hope flickering in her chest. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been broken. But it wasn't just about the past. Daniel's transformation wasn't just about mending his relationship with Harmony. It was about healing himself. He knew that his mistakes, the addiction, the years of neglecting his family, had to be faced before anything could be fixed. He had spent countless hours in therapy trying to understand the root of his pain, and now he was finally ready to move forward. "I'm clean now," he told her one evening, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been sober for over 5 years. I'm not who I was. And I'm ready to help you and Lily, to help Louie. I'm not going anywhere." Harmony's heart swelled with pride. Her son had done the impossible. He had faced his demons, and he had come out the other side. And now he was here offering his help, ready to make up for the years he had lost. As they sat together that evening, Harmony felt a shift in the air, a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The family was reconnecting slowly but surely. The broken pieces were beginning to fit together, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that they could heal. The days began to feel lighter for Harmony, Louie, and Lily. They were no longer trapped in the cycle of fear and uncertainty that had defined their lives for so long. Every day was a step forward, no matter how small. Harmony had never imagined that life could feel so peaceful again. The weight of financial struggles and the impending threat of eviction still lingered in the background, but there was a sense of hope now that she hadn't felt in years. With Daniel's help, things had begun to change. He took on more responsibility, helping her with the bills, and even spending time with Lily and Louie, offering his support in ways she had never expected. It was a gift, a new chance at family. The house felt different now, not just physically but emotionally. Lily was stronger each day, her laughter more frequent, her spirits higher despite her ongoing battle with cancer. Louie had become an integral part of their world, offering comfort and stability in a way that only a dog could. The bond between them, between Harmony, Louie, and Lily, had grown into something unshakable. They had all healed in their own ways from the wounds of their past. Harmony found herself smiling more often, laughing at small moments of joy, like when Louie followed Lily around the house, tail wagging as she read aloud to him, or when Daniel would bring home small treats for Louie as a way of showing his affection for the dog who had in many ways helped heal their family. It was a life that not long ago Harmony thought was beyond reach. One afternoon, after a long walk with Louie and Lily, they sat together in the garden, the warm sunlight streaming through the trees. Louie lay at their feet, content and peaceful. Harmony looked at her daughter, who was leaning against her, and at Louie, whose once sad eyes were now full of trust. She could hardly believe how far they had come from the dark days of isolation and suffering. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Harmony said softly, her voice full of emotion. Lily nodded, her small hand resting on Louie's head. "We're a family now, Grandma. It feels good, doesn't it?" Harmony's heart swelled with pride. A family. They were a family despite all the years of pain, all the struggles, and all the losses. Together, they had made it through. They had found strength in one another, and that strength had carried them through their darkest times. "I think Bill would be proud of us," Harmony whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. She thought about the letter Bill had left about how he had planned for Louie to be her protector even after he was gone. It had taken time, but now she understood why he had made that choice. Louie had protected them all just as Bill had known he would. Her voice broke through the silence, filled with a quiet determination. "We've been through so much, but I know one thing we're not giving up. Not now. Not ever." Daniel, sitting nearby, looked over at his mother with a soft smile. "You're right, Mom, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for good this time." Harmony's heart ached with gratitude. The road ahead was still uncertain and they would face challenges, but for the first time she felt like they could face it all together. The family had healed, and in doing so they had found a new kind of strength. They had learned that even in the most difficult moments, love and patience could heal the deepest wounds, and so they began their new life together. The story of Louie Harmony and their journey of healing serves as a powerful reminder of the transformative power of love and compassion. Through their shared experiences, we are reminded that animals, especially loyal and loving companions like German shepherds, have the ability to heal not only their own wounds but also the hearts of the humans they bond with. Louie's story, from the pain of abandonment to finding safety and love, illustrates how every life, human or animal, deserves kindness, patience, and respect. German shepherds, known for their intelligence, loyalty, and protective nature, are more than just pets. They are partners in life, companions who stand by our side through thick and thin. Louie's transformation from a broken and fearful dog to a source of comfort and strength for Harmony and Lily highlights the incredible bond between humans and animals, one that is based on trust, care, and the shared experience of overcoming hardship. At its core, this story speaks to the importance of rescuing not just animals, but ourselves. By offering compassion to those in need, whether they walk on 2 legs or 4, we not only change their lives, but our own. The simple acts of kindness, whether it's a rescue, a touch, or a promise to protect, have the power to heal deep wounds. In a world that often feels divided and disconnected, the journey of Louie and Harmony teaches us that togetherness, care, and love can conquer even the hardest trials. Let it inspire us to open our hearts to those in need, whether they be animals or people, and to recognize the profound difference a small act of kindness can make. Love in all its forms has the power to heal, rebuild, and unite us all.